Welcome to the Dynasty Evaluation Show. We are here. We got a great guest today, Jeremy, to talk about Ricky White. It's going to be an exciting show. We're going to dive into a lot of rookies next coming weeks, but we got to kick it off somewhere, and we started with the best. So let's get going. So we were able to talk pregame for a little bit about the terrible situation that is Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And, as a Dan Marino fan my whole life, I saw him get so close, even in the Super Bowl, and lose to the 49ers and then losing to Patriots in the AFC Championship game. And, just never got over the hump to get back to the Super Bowl again. I'm thinking the Bills will have a lot more opportunities than Dan Marino did going forward. But we got a Bills fan with us today that kind of suffered through, as you see his background, all the Bills helmets. Suffered through a little bit more trauma than I did, and I was almost ready to cry yesterday. So, Jeremy, tell me about yesterday's game. What do you think about all the stuff that happened? How bad are you hurt today?
It's going to take a lot more than that to hurt my feelings terribly. It stinks. I am definitely bummed, but it's one of those we kind of talked about, like you said beforehand, of until they beat it and slay that kind of mental hurdle, I just don't know if they're going to get there. They need someone to make a play, and that's what just hasn't happened. It's too much to rely on Josh regularly, and when he can't be a superhero, it seems like they fall short slightly. So this was a very untalented room. It was also a team that was very cap strapped. So I'm excited to see hopefully some of that dead cap falls off here in the offseason. They can kind of make a couple moves, bring some people in, hopefully generate some more pass rush, shore up the secondary, and maybe add a receiving threat. Hopefully Keon Coleman takes a step. I'm always optimistic. I've spent 30 years following this team, and they've always found a way to let me down. But I'm always optimistic. Always next year. That's our saying in Buffalo. Always next year. So it continues.
That's the
one day later from disappointment.
That's the Bears motto. That's the Bengals motto. The Bengals won a couple years ago. I guess I can't say that, but I don't know. It is what it is. That's why they play the games, because this kind of stuff happens. So, but Jeremy, where can everybody find you at? What's going on? Tell us all the stuff you got going on in the Dynasty and fantasy football world that everybody who doesn't follow you yet should follow you, and what they will get when they follow you.
Look at a cool friend. I'm pretty cool. That's about it. Yeah, you can find all my work over at ftnfantasy.com. It's pretty much everything: rankings, Dynasty articles, etc. We also have the FTN Dynasty podcast that I do a couple times a week that you can find in pretty much any podcast episode. I do start sit show during the season, stuff like that. Right now we're pretty much focusing in on the scouting reports. So the rookie scouting reports, there's one on Ricky White that's up right now. Continue through hopefully the top 50 prospects that I have for rankings over there as well. So some pretty much prospect stuff. It's about all I'm working on right now. Tis the season. So
tis the season. JT, what do you think about yesterday's game? Games.
Oh, I was heavy on the Bills. I lost about 4 parlays on the Bills not winning that game. It was pretty brutal. Also, my boy Ray Davis, I had him over 11 rushing, 10.5 rushing yards. He had 4. Killed me. So I missed a prize picks one on that one. I would have had a six pick parlay. I hit everything but that one. So that was rough. I know that there's a ton of stuff everybody talking about the Chiefs get every call, but man, when stuff like that happens yesterday, that's why people say that. I still don't understand how that Josh Allen 4th down wasn't a first down. That blew my mind. I thought they had the first down the play before. I thought was a bad spot, and then he went for it. But also, Bill's coaching staff, they figured out he was going left on every QB sneak, and yet they kept running it and getting it stuffed. Like, at some point as a coaching staff, you got to be like, hey, run an option with him, do a different play, do something. I thought the Bills got out coached heavily down the stretch. I thought that was a big problem in that game. Andy Reid just had the right calls at the right time, and the defense did too. man, catches that deep bomb. It's a different ball game. Kincaid pulls that in, but also I can't believe Josh rolled into the pressure when they brought the heat and he didn't throw it back to Shakur. Shakur was wide open. It would have been, he would have had maybe one guy miss and it would have been a touchdown. So little plays. I mean, we talk about all the time in the NFL. It's not, I mean, game, we always say game in inches, but man, it's one or two plays swings games so often. I thought this was the year they're going to get over the hump. But I compared it as a Steelers fan to when the Steelers would lose the Patriots all the time, even when the Steelers seemed like they had a better team. They just could never seem to get past the Patriots. And I feel like the Bills are just kind of lumped into that. They just can't get past the Chiefs. And my God, every time you think this Chiefs team's going to finally, their luck's going to run out, it doesn't. It's wild to me.
It is wild. It is wild. I think biggest game changer was me and Jeremy were talking pre-show about that 50-50 ball that should have been an incomplete pass that they gave to the Chiefs, and it was like that was just crap too. There was, we could cry about calls all until the cows come home, but it's one of those things where it is what it is. They reviewed them, they looked at the play. There's a lot of questionable calls that kind of all went the Chiefs' way, and that's why people have so many memes about the refs wearing Chiefs jerseys and part of the team, and but overall, it was a good game. A little bit sloppy at times, but at the same time, it is what it is. So, all right, so we are here today to talk about some college players that are entering the NFL, and a guy I had on a couple of my C2C teams, Ricky White. So I asked around, who wants to take over who, and Jeremy gave me a list of some players he has. Ricky White put on a couple of my C2C teams, so I was very happy to talk about him to get this series off. So I threw him a couple questions. I told him to, if you get a chance, take a look at these. So the first question I asked Jeremy was the good on paper, analytics, test score, stuff like that. Like, what do you see written down places? What did you write down that looks good on paper? Because we're going to talk about what's good on film and what's bad on paper and what's bad on film and all that kind of stuff too. But what's good on paper that you saw so far about Ricky White?
So with Ricky White, the biggest indicator, at least that I look at, like on paper and the analytical sides, is yards per route run. Plenty of information out there that proves that it is one of the more predictive stats in fantasy football. I tend to like to look at it as a entire college career. Not many people do. Some people like to make the argument that that's not the best process because of the college level. Sometimes early on, they're not really involved in offenses. They're just more clearing space as a younger freshman. But for me, with Ricky White, he's ranked 32nd out of the last, since 2020, I should say. So that's the last 4 years, with 2.69 yards per route run amongst the people that I have data on, which is pretty much almost every draftable player or every drafted player in the last few seasons. So that's a plus. We also see that his career high, according to Pro Football Focus, was 3.83 in that category. We also see he has over 1,300 yards after the catch, which is exciting. Very good. We've seen him operate inside the slot and out wide, giving some positional variance there also. So yeah, pretty much that's what I'm looking at as far as the paper side of it goes. We also see that he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons in 2023 and 2024, and has had 19 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, 24 total for his career. So it's positive numbers everywhere you look around kind of the statistical area of it. Not too much to complain about outside of, some minor little tweaks there analytically. John, you're muted, by the way.
JT, anything on the analytics side that you want to chime in about? Anything that hopes?
Yeah, I think I'm probably higher on Ricky White than a lot of people. If you look at most people's rankings, they probably have him somewhere in their 20s range, 20 to 25, 26, something like that. I personally have him at 15 on my board. I'm higher. He's probably right now, a lot of people have him as a 6th, 7th round pick. I think he has a chance to work his way up into maybe a late 4th, early 5th round pick. He's a guy that, if my team needed a wide receiver and I'm looking to take a shot on a guy late in the draft, he's one of the top of the guys on my list. Like, I like what he's done. The fact that, he had an absolute fantastic 2023. a little step back production wise in 24, but the quarterback play was horrible. It was horrible, and he still had a good year. So to me, I think that's a plus for him if you really want to look at it. I mean, he went from 88 catches, 1,483 yards, and 8 touchdowns in 2023, over 105 yards per game. Went down to 79 catches, 1,000 yards, but 11 TDs with maybe a slightly better team, but a worse quarterback play. They really, really relied on him in 2023 to do almost everything. Last year, he got some help. And people forget, he did go to UNLV, but he was a Michigan State. Originally went to Michigan State before he transferred after his freshman year. I think he's a little higher recruit than people remember. He was a high 3-star, low. A couple places had him maybe as a low 4-star, but it's more of a high 3-star recruit. I just like what I've seen out of him. The production for me this last year, the fact that there was games where he was completely ignored, which blows my mind. The quarterback never even looked his way. And he still was able to put up the kind of stats he did this year, I think was impressive. So he's definitely a guy on my list. I'm really interested to see where he goes in the draft. But I tell you what, if he can sneak in on a decent team somewhere in that late 4th round, even early 5th, he's going to be a guy that's still going to be in my fantasy draft boards. I'm definitely going to be looking at him as maybe a late 3rd, 4th round pick. Because I really, outside of that tier, I don't know, Jeremy, how you have it, but outside that top 2 tiers of wide receivers, I think things get really jumbled in this group. I think there's a lot of guys super similar to each other talent wise. Now, do they all play the same? I don't think so. But as far as talent wise and the way they're going to get evaluated by NFL teams, I think there's just a huge chunk of guys all together. And so I think it's going to be who likes who better. I think there's going to be a lot of personal where the teams like, I just for some reason like this guy a little bit more. I just think Ricky White is going to be one of those guys that you're going to find a team that really, really likes what he does and decides, hey man, we're willing to pick him maybe a little higher than he's supposed to go because we don't want to miss out on him. And that's where I think you could see him maybe sneak into like a 4th round, late 4th round pick. But I like Ricky White a ton. Very interesting to see where he goes. Some landing spots, he'll go higher for me. But he's a guy, honestly, even if he ends up in a bad landing spot, I'm probably going to take a shot at him at the end of drafts just because I like his profile. And I think he's a guy that can make his way into I think he could be a decent, wide receiver flex play at the next level, depending on where he ends up.
Yeah, I was watching some film, but we're going to talk about next about the good that's on film for Ricky White. I was watching the highlights against when he played Michigan, when he was out of Michigan State, and just he had I think he had 3 touchdowns that game. But it was just watching him go down the field. He doesn't seem to be afraid of contact either. He's kind of versatile. He plays all over the place. He's not like he doesn't get tripped up very easy, and he kind of, I'm not going to say like Walter Payton initiated contact, but he's not afraid to like kind of stick the boom first. Jeremy, what did you see on tape that was good that you saw about Ricky White?
Yeah, I mean a lot. I am pretty high, like JT said. I at the moment would probably say above consensus. I haven't really looked a ton as far as across the board with other fellow fantasy analysts as far as where they have Ricky White, but I do have him top 20 as well overall in my Superflex rankings at the moment. I do think he got snubbed a little bit for the Senior Bowl as opposed to the Shrine Bowl, but he's there now and he's tearing it up early on. But what Ricky White does really well, which is very good for today's game, is he's very good at getting defensive backs off their base of center, we'll call it, their balance. He does very well kind of initiating outside of the line of scrimmage with some quick twitch. Very good inside, kind of getting inside leverage on players, especially in the red zone. He does really well here and kind of gets the inside leverage and just off of a quick couple head fakes as well as jab steps. We also see him, like you said there, John, he's not afraid to get inside and kind of walk himself into coverage when he's battling against zone coverages. He does sit pretty well inside zone coverages as well, doesn't really run through them, which is a plus. And then we also do see that he is a solid route runner. He's not the greatest route runner by any means. He does better on like those leverage type of attacking routes where they're more 45s or not required to have to hit the hard breaks on the in routes and stuff like that. But he does all right on hitches. He can kind of press the DBs really well and break that off and kind of settle in, and does well in that type of route running. But as far as if you're asking him to really create elite separation with a good hard break, it's not really there yet. So we'll have to see if he can kind of go ahead and do that. But he's a very good accelerator, very good decelerator as well. So a lot of things to like with Ricky White, as far as keeping it into the realm of what he's good at. It's kind of really high pointing the football, the quick release twitch that he has, and then the ability to kind of attack all three levels of the field with his routes, just not as crisp as we would love.
Yeah, his slants and his kind of double moves on the outside are, they're pretty nice, and his acceleration is pretty good as far as watching DBs trying to recover from getting double moved. From how do you call it, like catching the bait? Because they fell for the bait on the double moves, and then his acceleration is pretty good on the outside, and he knows he's pretty good on the sidelines as far as knowing where he's at. His awareness is pretty good. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, his sideline awareness, his body control, all of that in those type of contested catch type of situations is very good too. Sorry.
JT, Ricky White was on my team for C2C in my championship run. Thank you for my double championship. I just wanted to keep rubbing that in our league. But
I got ripped. I didn't make the playoffs on either side, even though I was like the number 2 and number 3 scorer on the college and pro side. We got to get that fixed in that league. That's ridiculous. I didn't make the playoffs. If I would have made the playoffs on the college side, I think I would have won it. I had a monster run down the stretch.
What did you see?
But congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
I like what Ricky White does, man. I think he's going to be in that 4.45 range. So I think he's got, he's not the most blazing fast guy, but he's got good speed, 6'1", 190. These days is not too bad. I mean, he's not too small. He's got decent size. Like I said, the fact that he was a guy that went to Michigan State, he had a huge breakout game at Michigan State, 190. I think he had 196 in a game as a freshman, set a record, but injuries slowed him down there before the transfer. I just think he's a guy that can run every route. And I also think if you get him with some pro wide receiver coaches, I think he's a guy you could really see step his game up as he learns from different professional wide receivers. I mean, I'm not to knock the UNLV coaching staff, but wide receiver coaching thing, I mean, that was not a highlight of their team. I mean, they really were a team that wanted to run the ball. Again, they had a running quarterback most of the time. They didn't have guys that really threw the ball a bunch after Mavia transferred to USC from the year before. So, but we saw what kind of, with a guy like Mavia in 2023, what he could do. So I just think, the fact that he's not a one-trick pony either. I think he can run deep. He's not the greatest deep route guy, but I think he's got enough speed to burn you. But I also think he runs decent enough short to medium intermediate routes that he can mix it up enough to keep guys off guard. What I've seen so far, I haven't seen a lot of highlights of him at the down at the bowl game yet, but I've seen some one-on-ones. He's looking pretty solid there from what I've seen against some decent competition. I think a team's going to fall in love with him as a late round pick. I know this is going to sound insane to some people because he just had such a good rookie season, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of McMillan, Jalen McMillan from Washington, now on Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he has that kind of game in him. Now, will he hit like McMillan did as a rookie? I don't know. Again, that's going to be situational wise, what team he ends up, and does he have a clear shot to playing time? McMillan got off to a slow start and then injuries happened. Godwin went down and he got his chance and he was really good. I think Ricky White has that upside with his film, watching what he can do. Because again, Jalen McMillan fell in a lot of drafts on a lot of draft boards, especially fantasy wise, because people are like, oh, what is he? Is he a deep guy? Is he a short guy? Is what? But you saw he can do a little bit of everything. And so I think Ricky White, to me, that's my favorite comparison for him is Jalen McMillan. I think he can be that type of player. I don't think he'll ever be a team's number one, but I think he could be a legit, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on the right team.
Yeah, I think one thing that we haven't really talked about that separates him from McGlynn. I like the call on like kind of the closest to McGlynn, but he's almost like a McGlynn Jerry Jeudy hybrid because we haven't really mentioned something that I forgot to mention too in his goods on tape is like he's very good after the catch. He has 49 missed tackles forced in his entire career, according to Pro Football Focus. He also has over 1,300 yards after the reception, which is very good, near the top of this class as well. So that's something that Jerry Jeudy was very good at. And if you really watch the games and you just turn it on and you kind of just hold Jerry Jeudy in the back of your mind, they look similar with the ball in their hands, the way they move and kind of how they operate. He's not as polished as a route runner as Jeudy was coming out of Alabama, which is where I could see like sliding it towards McGlynn and kind of the movements in routes. He's probably not there yet with Jerry Jeudy was, but closer to what McGlynn was. But I really liked Jalen McMillan last year. So I do agree that I think that Ricky White could be that. You see, in my write-up over at FTN Fantasy, that's exactly where I have him too, is like a perfect Z receiver. That's what he's going to be. A second receiver to somebody's alpha that can kind of do everything, but isn't going to really be like counted on as the guy. And could be in short stints, but it shouldn't be like this is our go-to receiver for eternity. So,
yeah, I mean,
and I love that because I kind of had McMillan in that fantasy draft. I thought he would go like maybe third, fourth round in real life, and I was like, if I could get him in the third round of fantasy drafts or even like early fourth, depending on the type of league, I was like ecstatic. And I took McMillan all over the place because I got him anytime in that range. I think that's where I'm going to be at on Ricky White this year, depending on where he ends up. I think I'm going to be that mid to late third, early fourth is where I'm going to hopefully look to get him. But I like your Jeudy comp there too. I think you're right. I don't think he's not the route runner Jeudy is, but I think that's something he can still improve in because I think once he gets to the pro level and he sees and kind of works with other guys, I think you're going to see improvement from him. But I just think he's a higher talented athlete than most people are maybe giving him credit for. And I think you're right. He does run well with the ball. I actually think he runs a little bit better after the catch than McMillan. I think he's a little more elusive. So I like that as well.
If I got a late second, I'm taking Ricky White there. I'm not waiting until the fourth round come around. I mean,
it depends on where he lands. Like I said, I would go late second depending on where he lands, but I think you can get him in that third. I think you'll be able to get him in that third because again, John, here's what I think you're going to see. I think outside of the top 5, 6, 7 wide receivers that go in fantasy drafts, I think you're going to see a big bunch up. And it's going to be depending on what teams have, who they already have a guy, if there's a guy on their team, whether they don't want to double up a team, if somebody likes a landing spot a little bit more. I just think there's going to be a lot of movement in that like third tier, fourth tier wide receiver.
I also think you're going to have a big factor in how many running backs are taken. Because at the moment,
and that's why I think he's a third.
Crazy reports that it's going to be a
round is going to be all running back.
Yeah, there's going to like this absurd amount that they're going to have all these running backs taken super high. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that you'll see some of these guys fall because I tend to lean towards if there's a plethora of players available for NFL teams, they're going to wait on that position. Like they know if there's not a huge grade in their scouting grades, and they know there's a huge drop off at, say, tackle, they're going to draft tackles before they go after the running back because they know they can get someone comparable later in the draft. So I don't know if that happens, but either way, I think that just with the hype around this running back class, I think Ricky White will probably be available in third rounds outside of like crazy draft capital to like a perfect landing spot. I wouldn't see where he gets driven up much higher just based on not even himself, just the players that will get drafted around him.
Well, and like you said, because of how deep the running back class is, I think that's where I think NFL draft wise, if a team really likes Ricky White, that's why I could see him getting pushed up in the NFL draft a little bit. Being a team going like, hey, I've got these 3 wide receivers on my board and these 5 running backs. I'm pretty sure I can get one of those running backs. And out of these 3 wide receivers, I like Ricky White way better than the other 2 guys listed with him, where I could see a team maybe going, the wide receiver route with a Ricky White and then saying, oh, maybe I'll take him in the 4th and wait to the 5th to get a running back, as opposed to taking the running back in the 4th. That's where I could maybe see maybe a swap there.
Okay, I was talking fantasy, so I got miscommunication. Sorry on my part there, but moving on, Jeremy, what's the bad that you saw on? We'll talk about on like analytics wise, things like that, and also on tape. I mean, everybody's got some flaws. Everybody's got some things to work on. What do you got going on that would be kind of like chinks in the armor of a Ricky White?
1 second. Have JT go first.
JT,
sorry.
So, what did you see?
I'll jump on here. So, I don't think he has the greatest hands of all time. He's not like a guy that's like absolutely going to suction cup every ball to him. So I think he needs to work on hands just a bit. Though I do think he's got good hands. I just don't think they're elite. It's going to be interesting how much he goes against longer like press corners. I don't think he has a ton of experience against really good press corners that are bigger guys. So that'll be interesting to see at the next level if he goes against those types of guys, whether he will have much success against them or how much time it will take him to kind of learn those techniques to get off the line and break away from those coverages. I think that's something that he's going to definitely need work on. Like I said, with the hands, he's got pretty good hands, just not elite hands. And there's sometimes he when he's going on those short to intermediate routes, he sometimes loses the ball if there's contact. Sometimes he has a hard time holding on to the football if he's getting hit as the ball's getting there. But sometimes that can be catching the ball with your body as opposed to catching it with your hands, type of thing. So he has, it's like, again, I'm nitpicking here with some things. Those are just one of the things I think that is just a little bit about him that could be better. And I would say probably the bigger knock is I'm not sure his run blocking is great. I think that's something he's going to need to work on. I think he's an average blocker at best. I think he's going to have to work on having a little bit better effort. And he's not a huge guy by any means. Like I said, he's not tiny, but he's not big. So I think that was somewhere he could improve on as well as in the run blocking game.
Jeremy, how about you? What do you see on his tape and on his analytics that kind of gives you some concern, a little bit of concern anyway?
So my bad, there was a headphone malfunction. But as far as it goes with Ricky White, it's going to be at the catch point, much like JT said. The hands are strong. They're decent. They're not in that quote unquote elite territory. He does attack the ball a little bit more of like a kind of like a clap attack sometimes in some situations, which is not ideal. That's kind of leads to some drops. He had one of the higher drop rates amongst this class. So he is 5th according to Pro Football Focus in drop rate, which would be at 9.6%. So that's not ideal. We also see his contested catch is only a 39.3%. So that's not ideal either. That's a lower bottom half of this draft class. So everything that kind of comes from it kind of does stem into that catch point type of territory. And kind of like JT said, he's a physical player. He doesn't shy away from contact necessarily, but he isn't always the best when in those situations. We also see him let the ball get to his body a little bit more than you would like at times. So they're nitpicky, like he said. Definitely could be something too. He's, like I said, he's not the most polished route runner. I think he could do some improvement there, especially on the hard breaking routes. I think at the NFL level, when the corners are a little bit lengthier, a little bit more physical, a little bit more athletic, you're not going to see him take advantage of, say, like the Mountain West corners out in UNLV, where they're a little bit not up to snuff. So I think there could be some issues there making that adjustment for him. But he's going to have to really clean up his hands. We've seen it constantly. Yes, you could argue the Jamar Chase case where the drops were an issue and then he's fine, but he's not Jamar Chase talent level. These mid-tier type of talent players they need to be reliable. That's how you find your way into the field. Look at like the Romeo Dubs, etc. Like if you don't get high draft capital and you're not this physically gifted athlete that's Jamar Chase level, like mistakes cost you more in the NFL. It's as much as we want to say it's an even playing field, it's not. So that's going to be something he's going to have to clean up. But yeah, other than that, not too much to really worry about. There's a lot that I like more. The goods outweigh the bad for Ricky White.
Yeah, I saw instead of like using his hands like to go, he doesn't like attack the ball, kind of, and a lot of times he lets his body absorb the catch instead of like catching it where his hands should be where they're at. He lets the ball go into his when he's falling down or some of the away routes. He lets the ball kind of like go in his stomach, and then trap it instead of like going to get it and bringing it in. So I saw a couple of those too. So it's it's
and sometimes it's needed. Like they do. I mean, that is a coached thing at certain aspects, but like there's times where he shouldn't necessarily be doing that, and he's like letting it happen.
Yeah. Next question. So, what are some of the intangibles? Like anything like there's some things that people just have like off the field drama, like kind of family ties. Anybody in his family that played in sports already, good coaching. What's some intangibles for Ricky White that would that you might know that other people probably don't know that would maybe improve or hinder his possible draft stock?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of like say off the field or anything, but one of the intangibles that I wanted is actually an on the field trait, and that's going to be special teams. I think that that's going to be a spot that gets him drafted significantly higher and is going to have to be not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it's something we have to pay attention to. So what happens like at the NFL level, kind of like what JT said a little bit earlier, when the people are getting drafted, it's how do they fit into their NFL team? It's not for fantasy. I know we use it, and that's a way to correlate and kind of roster and like kind of rank these players. But Tutu Atwell got drafted super high, not because he was an amazing athlete, but because the Rams wanted to use him in a certain way and some special team stuff. Ricky White is absurd when it comes to blocking punts. I don't have it. Like, give me 1 second and I'll pull it up. But like, he had a crazy amount of blocked punts this year, like more than other teams had himself. So what's going to be a spot for him early on in his career, if he is a later round pick, will be his ability to get on the field as a punt blocker. Let me see if they have it on.
Yeah, contributing on special teams is humongous for getting drafted.
So he had some returns. He had 90 yards returning, 1 return to touchdown. I don't think they have actual punts blocked on Sports Reference.
Yeah, I couldn't find that stat either. I know I was looking for it too, but yeah, you're right on that.
But when you're watching the games and on the broadcast, they're talking about it and you see it. Like I watch, like most of the time I'm watching like the entire game played back. So it is a crazy amount of stats of blocked punts. I think he had like, it was almost 5 or 6, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot of blocked punts. if you don't like, that's a lot of blocked punts in one season. So I think that's going to be a way for him to get on the field. And that also just shows like his get off and his acceleration, that ability to get to a punter, like, and how rare that is to get punts blocked. So not only is he dodging a blocker, but he also has the speed and acceleration and length to kind of get in there and block the punts. So I think that that's kind of one of those intangibles that could be very important for Ricky White as far as getting on the field early in his career.
Yeah, when other coaches are preparing for you, when they know that you're blocking punts and you're still blocking punts, that's special. I saw just his how do you call it? His line right to the ball on those block punts was special, man. He was. I watched all 4 of them yesterday. No, I think it was 5 of them that they showed on somebody's thing. Somebody's YouTube page. They had a highlight of just him blocking punts, and I think it was 5. But yeah,
it was 4. Yeah, so I just looked it up, so I had to Google it. But 4 punts during the 2024 season. I knew it was up there.
I think it was was that on a field goal or something like that. But he had and it showed like it was amazing how he like just got to the outside, got right to the punter, and blocked those. It was pretty good to watch those. Things like that are what gets you in the NFL, and it's. Any intangibles, JT, that you could think of, or anything you saw that, like, anything off the field, anything on the field? Anything?
That was actually exactly what I was going to say. Was I think he could sneak up boards because I think teams will think, hey, as a rookie, he can be a gunner, he can be a punt block specialist, he can actually punt return because he is good in the open field. He does break tackles. He didn't do a ton of punt returning at UNLV, but like Jeremy said, he did have 1 return for a touchdown. So I think he could move up boards because of the fact that teams that really are really into special teams and put an emphasis on that, I think he's going to jump on boards because of that. Because I also think he's going to be a nice backup Z early in his career. The chance. On top of that, I think he's a guy that you can make him here 4th or 5th wide receiver, feel comfortable putting him in the game, and the fact that he can. Because here's the thing is, there's a lot of guys who are on rosters because they're good on special teams and they're not that good at wide receivers. I think he's going to be one of those guys that's like, oh, we can get this guy who could be a legit wide receiver 2 or 3 for us, and he's good on special teams. Like, sign me up, because there's a lot of guys out there right now that you look down rosters like, how is that guy like the 4th or 5th wide on the team? And it's only because they're good at special teams. But then they get in the game, you're like, yeah, they're not going to throw him the ball. But I think that's not Ricky White. The other thing I like about him a lot is I think he's highly underrated in running like drags and dig routes that I don't think he got utilized a lot at UNLV, but I think is one of those things. If you put him in the right coaching staff that runs those type of routes, I think he can flourish with that, running out of that Z package. I just think him coming across the field, he's got good speed. He's got good lateral speed. We always see that. I don't know if you guys know the drill where they run right down the line, they throw the ball and they catch it back side. He's one of those guys. He gets across the field really fast. So like, I remember, I don't know if you guys remember last year, we talked about Keon Coleman a little earlier for the Bills. His straight line speed wasn't the fastest in the world, but when he was running full speed across the field, he was running at like a legit speed. I think that's where you're going to see Ricky White too. I think he's going to be one of those guys that even though he runs like a 4.45, I think he's one of those guys that runs really well across the field. And I think that's going to be an advantage for him. So I like the fact that if he gets in the right offensive system and they use him on those deep drags across the field, behind the play, intermediate routes, I think he can crush on those types of plays.
Yeah, the in-game playing speed is great. Yeah, I noticed that too. That's fantastic. What is so my next question on the show sheet here, I'm going to kind of group all three of these together. So the NFL draft range projected by the experts, the NFL draft range projected by you, and then the NFL team, like kind of that would, let's just say like, what team would you want him to go to? Where do you think would be the best fit? So, Popes, Jeremy, what do you want? Do you want to answer those kind of questions? You can group them all together if you want, or separate them. That's up to you.
Yeah, for sure. So using mock draft database, at least the consensus seems like the 5th round right now. It's really early, and nor are you really going to probably find too much on a player this deep in the draft potentially. So the 5th round seems likely. I don't hate that spot. Like JT said, I could see him in like the 4th round, potentially late day 2 in like the compensatory picks type of territory, just because the special team stuff that he offers. I don't know if it's going to necessarily be for his receiving abilities totally, but that ability to be a multi-used player, which is key at the back end of depth charts, and his potential to be a high-end receiver. I could see a little bit kind of sneaking 4th, potentially 3rd, unlikely the 3rd, but the 4th to 5th seems about right for a receiver into the discussion of where he stands today. As far as team fit goes, you're really trying to find him a spot that he would be a really good Z. So a position like the Giants, I think would be really good. He could play the Z to Malik Neighbors a little bit, but also play outside when called upon. Maybe Pittsburgh would be a good spot. Would allow Pickens to be the downfield threat and kind of give them that Deontay Johnson type of underneath type of player, get the ball in his hands, do some work, something that they're missing in that offense at the moment. You could see him, honestly, the Bills would be a good spot potentially. They need help on the special teams side of it. They also could use someone if Keon Coleman works out. If not, at least this is a little bit later. They're not going to invest 1st round pick capital probably in a receiver, so worth a shot there. Washington Commanders, Houston Texans, anybody that really needs that Z receiver, that underneath kind of working type of player that has already an alpha in place, really seems like a good spot for me with Ricky White.
JT?
You hammered a ton of the places I was going to say. I'm glad that you were in line there. I've done a ton of mock drafts on PFF. I think the Steelers in the 5th round is an absolutely great landing spot for him. I think they would absolutely love for him for what he can do and how he would fit that team. I 100% agree with you on that. I've got him in the 5th round for the Steelers a bunch of times on Knox. I think the Giants, like you said, is a nice spot for him. I also think Arizona would be a decent landing spot for him on the Cardinals. There's a couple other teams I think could sneak in there. I'm looking at some other teams that have some openings. Maybe could go. Maybe the Saints. I know they have Shaheed, but I think there's a chance that he could maybe work out with someone like them. I like all those spots quite a bit actually. Depending on what happens with some of these other guys on some other team, and there's some depending on what like Jacksonville wants to do with Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis. I think he could fit there on the opposite side of Brian Thomas Jr. I think he could be a nice little fit over there as well. So I think these teams that there's a couple of teams out there that just seem to care about special teams just a bit more than other teams, and that's why I think the Steelers. The Steelers. There's guys that literally are on the roster just because of special teams. I mean, you look at their roster last year with Miller and Shrunk. Some of the guys that are on their team. I mean, they're literally almost never in the offense unless somebody's hurt and they have to play, but they are on the roster just for special teams. And I think Ricky White would be a guy they would absolutely love. The fact that he could help Calvin Austin with punt returning, but also just the blocking ability being on that Z opposite of Pickens, I think it would be a perfect spot. Now, the biggest problem with them is they have to actually run drag routes and stuff like that the Steelers hate to do. But if they actually ran those routes with him, I think he would be successful. But yeah, there's definitely some spots I can see him that where he could, given the right circumstances and given time, I think he could eventually be a pretty solid player.
I was kind of hoping you guys weren't going to say the Jaguars because that was my favorite spot to go. I really like that they're going to have a new kind of more offensive-minded coach, first of all. And then to play, I don't think he's ever going to be Ricky White's ever going to be a number 1. But to be a number 2 or number 3, it puts him in a real great position to succeed. So I love that you guys mentioned the Jaguars, too. There's a couple – he's not going to be number 1 anywhere. I don't ever think that's going to happen. But I honestly think he could be a really, really good number 3 somewhere. So – that's kind of where I'm at with
I mean, the Jags, if they just move on from Gabe Davis and they go Brian Thomas Jr. and then Kirk like in the slot and then him in the Z, that's a nice little group there for Trevor Lawrence. I actually kind of like that. So I think that would be a nice spot for him too. And again, like I said, just looking at it, like who was where, that's where I thought Arizona would be kind of a sneaky spot, playing opposite of Marvin Harrison Jr. and with McBride at tight end. I think that would be kind of a spot where, because they played a lot of guys in that Z, kind of no one's really super succeeded or been great there. I think that could be a spot, but I definitely do. I think when it comes down to it, when he gets drafted, I think that's what you're going to hear out of the team when they ask him about him. They're going to be like, "Oh, we loved his special teams. We loved what he could do. We thought we could use him in a bunch of different ways." I think that's where he goes. And that's why I think I've got him going in the 5th round of drafts right now. I think a lot of people have him in the 5th, 6th. I could see him sneaking in the late 4th if a team's just like, we got to get him. I love this guy's special teams and his upside as a wide receiver.
I think I value him a little bit more as a wide receiver than possibly you guys do. I don't think he's great, but I think he's just I must be a little bit high on him, I guess, just because I watched him so much. Because I watch UNLV games all the time when he was on TV because I had him on fantasy teams. Maybe that's something to do with it. But the 5th round, it kind of hurts my feelings a little bit, man.
John, it's going to be interesting. Here's the thing: is I don't think over the last couple of years the 4th and 5th round is not the death nail it used to be. I mean, it used to be like, oh, if you didn't go second or third round, like you're done. Like the chances of you ever being relevant are super slim. I don't think that's the case anymore because I think teams have like, as they figure out, hey, I got to go O-line, I got to go some of these other positions. Some positions just naturally kind of fall a little bit deeper in the drafts, as we've seen with running backs. You know, you can get a fourth, fifth round running back, and they could easily start or be your backup with no problem. Now, I think these wide receivers, I think Ricky White can be a really good wide receiver. I just don't think he's a guy that comes in and immediately is a really good wide receiver at the next level. I think he's going to take a little time to work on his route running, do some different things. But he's a guy, if he doesn't break out his rookie year, go out and try to get him the second year because he's a guy I could see taking a year to really pull it all together and get it together, really playing special teams as a rookie. And then maybe that second year, being a guy that jumps into the starting lineup full time. So I definitely think he has the potential. I think it's there. I really do. I like Ricky White a ton. Just looking at what NFL guys do, this isn't a great wide receiver class. It's just not, it's not, I think it's deep in that there's a lot of good players. I just don't think there's a lot of guys separating themselves. So it's going to be interesting through this draft process. Is there guys that kind of talk guys into that third, fourth round? Because I think there's got a couple guys that are first round for sure. I think there's a handful of guys I think are going to go in that second round. And then there's a bunch of guys I could see going third round all the way to fifth round. And so that's why I think this draft process is going to be really, really interesting to see who kind of moves up or down those boards. I think Ricky White, if I had to guess, he's the one guy I would take in that probably tier 3, tier 4 that would move up. He would be the guy I put my money on that he would win out in this draft process and move up draft boards and have a shot to get taken earlier.
I just think that a lot of things that he struggled with at the collegiate level, you can like not necessarily like falsely make look good, but kind of falsely make look good in like these formats that you're going to see him perform in now. You know, like the one-on-ones and the drills at the Shrine Bowl, the drills and everything at the combine are going to kind of make him look a little better in the areas than that he did struggle at the collegiate level. You know, they're going to see that on tape, obviously not overlook it, but they'll probably be able to see, hey, okay, we see what's a little bit wrong as far as like his hip stiffness or anything like that, in and out of breaks and stuff like that, that they can say, all right, we can fix that, you know, and he has the other tangibles we want. So what he does well will help him rise a little bit through this draft process, I think.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Anything else that we missed? Anything else you guys want to add? I think you guys pretty much over excelled in some of the questions I asked. So you guys had a lot of great information today. So if there's anything I missed, anything else you want to add, like something else that maybe we didn't cover today? Because I think
we hit it pretty good. Like I said, I think the big thing is going to be landing spot for him. You know, if he ends up in a pretty deep wide receiver group where somebody takes him pretty much to play special teams, I'll be slightly lower on him in my fantasy drafts, but he's a guy I want anyway because I like the talent, and I've tried to teach myself in fantasy drafts, like draft the talent, don't always draft for situation, because I've convinced myself in situations sometimes where I'm like, do my pre-draft rankings, then I go and see where guys get drafted, and then I'm like, oh, that guy's situation's so good, and I talk myself into a situation where I'm like, I had this other player 5 spots or 7 spots higher in my rankings, but then I want to draft the other guy because I feel like his situation is better. And we've learned situations can change pretty quickly these days. And trading in the NFL, something that didn't happen a lot in the past, you know, is a pretty regular thing for teams to move on or do different stuff. So that's one of those things I want to keep in mind as this draft process goes on. Where do I like White compared to some of these other guys? And if he doesn't fall into an ideal situation, that doesn't mean I need to just look past him or not take him. I need to still consider, like, maybe this is not an ideal spot, but it still gives me. I mean, look at Jalen McGlynn. I mean, he went there and you're like, he's not really going to get a lot of playing time. They're pretty good at wide receiver. And then boom, you know, a couple injuries happen. He gets a chance. Baker Mayfield's playing out of his mind. And all of a sudden, everybody wants Jalen McGlynn on their team. So definitely things can change. So he's a guy, even if he does slip, say he even does slip to the 6th for some reason, he's still a guy I'm going to have my eye on in fantasy draft just because I like the talent.
Yeah, I think that's a key factor. Just like as John and JT, you guys continue this stretch here of prospect stuff to look at is not necessarily. I'm not a big proponent to talent over situation. I think that you need to take both into consideration. The Jalen McMillan comp is not bad, but you have to think about it too. People need to start paying attention to contract situations, the outlook of teams, ages, especially in Dynasty. If you're playing Dynasty at a surface level, it's going to be hard for you. And on the contrary, it's hard to know all the information you need. But McMillan made a ton of sense. He was drafted to replace Chris Godwin. That's his role. That's his job. That's what he does well. That's what Godwin does well. Godwin was up near his 30s. He was on a contract year. Who knew if they were going to extend him or not? You know, that's why we saw McMillan hit, because Godwin went down, like you said. So the talent needs to be there, but the opportunity needs to be there too. Because just much like you would say, like Ray Davis, you were talking about earlier, like Ray Davis is a very good running back. He's shown in an opportunity he will be a good running back. But like if James Cook doesn't get hurt, he's useless. You know what I mean? Like, so in certain situations, the talent doesn't always outweigh the opportunity. I think that we need to learn to just kind of take it together and be able to forecast.
Yeah, find that medium ground. Like,
and that's because sometimes the talent over situation can hurt you as well. So just food for thought. Extra nugget, not pertaining to Ricky White, but either way, Ricky White's going to be great.
We love extra nugget.
Either way, Ricky White's going to be great. Bills are going to draft him. They're going to win the Super Bowl. No.
There you go. Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming on today. Much appreciated. This is a great way to kick off this series of our rookies, 2025 rookies coming in. Appreciate all the information. And once on the way out, just kind of where can everybody find you again?
Yeah, if you X and Blue Sky, I'm on at Pope's FFH. If you're on either of those, and then all the work's over at ftnfantasy.com, and then obviously the FTN Dynasty podcast as well, where you can come listen to me for 30 minutes and my nice muted voice, and maybe it can be relaxing. Maybe you'll learn something. I don't know. I learned something, but
I learned something. I learned a couple things today. JT, let everybody learn where they can find you at. What's going on with you?
Yeah, you always find me here. Beside you here, John, at Dynasty Evaluation. Also can find me on the Stew with JT Brew, my podcast there. Usually do mostly sports, gambling, college football, NFL football during the season, but do a lot of draft stuff in the off season. So check me out there. If you're into hockey, make a plug for Around the Ice, our fantasy hockey show on Fantasy and Frames on Tuesday nights. So make sure to check that out. All my draft coverage, all my articles I'm writing right now are on DLF, Dynasty League Football. I've got all kinds of stuff coming out there. I've got profiles. I just wrote one on Shedeur Sanders. I just wrote one on Cam Ward. I've got one on Ted McMillan. I've got one coming out on Travis Hunter this next week. So I got a bunch of them there. So if you are a member over there or want to take a chance and get like a 1-month membership, now is the time to do it when we get all the rookie stuff going. Go over and check them out. I've got all my articles and a bunch of other articles from all the other good writers there doing. We've got players coming out every day. They've got a new rookie profile. So all kinds of good stuff over there. And also check out my IDP rankings there. And I'm also going to be new to the Devy ranks over there at DLF. So I will have my new Devy rankings up hopefully by the end of the week. So if you're a C2C player or somebody that has in a Devy league where you can draft Devy guys, I'll have my rankings over there as well.
I am John McGlynn, John McGlynn 75 on X. That's where most of my content's at. I have some awesome shows on, awesome guests on, like Jeremy and JT is always with me. We'll have a bunch of guys coming down the entire offseason before the Senior Bowl, after the Senior Bowl, before the Combine, after the Combine, pre-draft, post-draft. We're going to try and get as many guys on here as we can, many players to evaluate, find all these nuggets out about special teams play and blocking downfield and all the good stuff from all these rookies. So we're going to keep pumping them out. I'm not sure the exact schedule, but I'll give some notice. But thanks for joining me on the Dynasty Evaluation on Fantasy and Frames, and we're going to keep them coming. I'll talk to you guys later.